The Lost Signals present
Children of the Night.
a celebration of universal horror
One more picture, then we will dig it out.
and another Halloween sequel
They'll survive its memory.
with in-depth analysis,
I know what it feels like to be God.
adult content,
The drugs I took seemed to light up my brain.
adult language,
You have to open graves, find girls to fall in love with.
and spoilers.
Bela became a wolf, and you killed him.
Join us.
Hello there. Welcome back to Lost Signals, MOTS-O-Ween Marathon 2018. I, of course, am your unethical scientist for the night, Scott Thurlow. I'm here with my loyal manservant, Christopher Morgan,
I'm alive.
and our unholy creation, Stephen Amosi.
Aloha.
And you might have gathered that in our continuing our marathon, we're doing the classic Universal monster movies, and tonight we're doing Frankenstein, the original from 1931. And I've got the logline real quick. It's just, for science, you monster, obviously.
Yeah.
And with that, we're going to go to Chris for the plot.
Okay, plot's pretty simple. Henry Frankenstein, whose name's changed from the book for some reason, and his faithful manservant Fritz start grave digging to build a monster. Fritz goes to steal a brain and steals an abnormal brain, a criminal brain, and they go back to
Chekhov's brain is
the Chekhov. Yeah, exactly, Chekhov's brain. They go back to the laboratory and create a monster. And the monster kills Fritz and runs
Everybody
amok.
calls him a monster.
Actually,
Poor misunderstood monster.
Exactly.
yeah, we'll get
to that.
Yeah, we'll get to that because I got a lot to say on that. And then the monster has to be destroyed, and Victor Frankenstein
Not Victor Frankenstein.
Henry Frankenstein.
Although there was a Victor.
Hank Frankenstein.
Hank Frank.
Yeah.
Hank Frank
Nice.
ends up, whatever. I guess he's going to end up getting married at some point. So anyway, that's basically it.
Well, he was engaged to a woman named Elizabeth that shows up during the plot.
Yeah, I was trying to just keep
But
it
that's
brief.
the big.
yeah.
That's it. Those are the broad strokes. So for jumping the scores, I'm looking at a 2. It's not weak enough for a 1. It certainly isn't a 3. It's the plot that it needs to be. It's perfectly fine throughout. I'm taking off points. Probably you guys might back me up that there are certain couple of scenes here and there that could have been cut or ran out a little bit too long. But other than that, it's a perfectly fine story. It's like the story that you know from the original Gothic novel, pretty much. So yeah, it works perfectly well to me. What do you guys think?
I'm going to give it a 2 as well because I like the beginning, I like the ending, and it just the middle was kind of dragged a lot, I thought.
Sure.
It did get a little saggy in the middle. I agree with that, but
Sure.
but I thought that the intro and the conclusion were both really strong.
Yeah.
Much more so than the previous monster movies that we've watched
Up
in
to this point. Yeah.
in this
I would
this
agree,
Halloween. So as you may
largely.
have gathered by now, if we haven't already told you, I forget what we've said in other episodes, but we're doing all the Universal original
That's
monster movies and
The classics.
all the classics. And this one so far is the one that has stood out the most for me.
Okay.
That being said, you're absolutely right. It does sag a little in the middle. It's a little. There are things that could be cut out, but
Yeah. I'm just saying here and there. They could have tightened it up a bit, but I
Yeah.
understand why it isn't so.
I really, I really like where this film goes. It is kind of confusing to me. So I've never read the original book. I don't know if you have, Chris.
In high school,
But
a long, long time ago.
is Frankenstein's assistant's name Igor in the book, or is it Fritz? Do you know? Do you remember?
I don't know if
I was wondering about
I don't
that.
remember, but
I failed to look it up.
I don't remember, but I remember the creation was actually well spoken, and I'm not sure if it was.
So they took some liberties.
Yeah,
So
it was
they
like
definitely took some
this,
liberties.
This moaning monster is a movie creation only. Right?
Sure.
I thought that it was as far as the plot goes. I won't get into the other stuff right now, but as far as the plot goes, I thought that it was really more so than the other ones that held my interest. But I think you're right. I'm going to give it a 2
Okay.
overall.
I think a 2 is what it deserves, and looks like we're all agreeing on that.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
I just want to. My final thought is I forgot to mention this, but at the intro, if you will, before the movie even begins, a cut rate sort of Rod Serling / Vincent Price character comes on screen and is like, what you will see is may be about to horrify you, so we warn you. Or like, it's like all like.
Actually,
like
that was the doctor from the who had the brains.
Was it?
Yeah.
It's the same guy.
Is the brains doctor?
Fine.
Is the brains
Oh,
doctor?
It's just a
man.
regular doctor, or it doesn't matter. But I just thought that was amusing because it was like, be prepared for horror. Ooh. But anyway, so looks like we're all given plot 2. So we'll just move on to themes, and that'll be you, Steve-O.
Yeah, so, Frankenstein's always had this theme. And I think it's interesting that you say, like, the monster in the book was well-spoken, and they completely take speech away from him in this one.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of neutering that character. That's kind of a like,
sure, it's a big
outside
difference.
theme, right? Like a meta theme almost of like, the way that they changed it for the movie. But in terms of this, like, you have the theme of, I'm just gonna go a brief one. Like, you have the theme of like a man trying to figure out what he is in the world, like the monster, Frankenstein's monster, like actually trying to figure out what he is in the world. Then you have like the theme of Frankenstein himself, like trying to play God,
Yes, exactly.
which is a big one. And there are actually a few, at least a couple more like really interesting themes in this. But I think it does a good job of exploring those without getting too campy, like a couple of the other movies have done. Like, and unlike, I mean, I guess I don't know if we're supposed to date these, but like we watched Wolfman already, and unlike Wolfman, it doesn't get creepy at any point, even when he's
Sure.
even when he's murdering a child.
Well, yeah.
Well, that's the monster.
but yeah.
I got you. I got more to say than that, but you go ahead, Chris.
The interesting thing about this is it's got the whole creation, man as God versus his creation, and the cool thing I found, and I think this movie is very important for the original story had that theme going through it, and
right.
That has since become a trope. This one I feel like is in a lot of ways more relevant to pop culture the way it is. I mean, because by making the monster more of an animal, I immediately thought of this movie when I read the book Jurassic Park, in that you're creating something that you can't reason with. You can't
bargain with it. You can't reason with it.
Yeah.
Doesn't feel pity or remorse, but it does feel fear.
Yeah,
Anyway.
I can't tell you your chances, but you have my sympathies. No, but I think that for this case, it's really, really important that the fact that you have something that doesn't understand its surroundings, doesn't understand what's happening to it, doesn't understand why it's there, and you can't explain it to it. I found, and even Karloff's performance, we'll get to that, Frankenstein is such a sympathetic creature. And I think
Frankenstein's monster.
The monster comes out. Frankenstein can fuck himself, but the monster to be so sympathetic, and I think this particular movie was the archetype for a lot of things that followed. So this is probably to me getting the strongest one.
Yeah, it looks like you're giving a 1. I'm assuming Steve-O as well.
Yeah. A pretty strong one for
so
this.
I agree with all that, like you said, like the man trying to play God thing, like that's always been the case, and it certainly was pretty obvious here as well. And yeah, like, is the monster like more sympathetic / really human than the actual humans? But like attached to that, sort of, I'm going to bring up something that maybe my log line reference, but pushing the limits of science perhaps into unethical boundaries. But right, I mean, like that's always sort of been contained therein. Like that goes hand in hand, sort of, with man trying to play God and so forth. And of course, like being destroyed or like having to combat your own creation when it goes horribly wrong or horribly right, even as the case may be.
But I think for 1931, all these things, all three of us took something else.
Yes,
and I think it's really important.
I think it's well done, the fact that they're all there.
Yeah, and like it's the themes in this movie are very strong. Like in terms of the monster trying to understand the world around it is I think like one of the ones that is most shown throughout the movie. Like the scene where they're throwing the flowers into the water, and then he throws the girl in the water, kills her. And like, oh, by the way,
it's accidental.
I will give but like I will give much credit for a guy for like 2 minutes carrying his dead daughter through town, like past all these like onlookers, and
not
like,
only
they
that,
did not
through the
flinch.
wedding celebration.
They didn't flinch away from that for
more or
a
less.
second.
Yeah,
It's
that's
just
a good
him
point.
carrying a dead body of like a little child through town. Like,
Well, I was gonna bring
Agreed.
that- I was
I
gonna
was
bring that
not
in-
expecting
in
that.
style, but yeah, you're right. That is there in the film. But no, like I said, like I think as you mentioned, Steve-O, that this one seems to have like the themes are better handled than at least the previous ones we've seen to this point, and I think they did a stronger job of addressing them. So I'm giving it a pretty strong one as well.
Completely agree.
All right, so that'll bring me to antagonists, which is a interesting one, perhaps. So is it? I'm going to borrow your term, like it. Is it Hank Frank? Is it the man who's trying to push the boundaries of science and his own morals in order to achieve his like workaholic dream of figuring out the secrets of life and death? Or is it the actual monster he creates who just runs amok because it doesn't know any better? It's thrust into a world that it's strange and afraid of.
So I love this question because it depends on who you are and like the way you look at the world. It's not even like depends on how you look at it is what it. It depends on you like as a person.
Sure, it's a good
in the way
mirror.
that you see this,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like it's so weird that like society has turned Frankenstein's monster, which especially in the original story. I mean, granted, I haven't read it, but I know enough about it to say this was supposed to be a you were supposed to have sympathy, a sympathetic creature for this monster, and like it's turned into just a like monster.
Sure.
Like just another monster. Like it, latter day movies in like the 80s and 90s like portray Frankenstein's monster as just like another like shambling like thing that's out
Almost
to kill
zombie.
everything it
Yeah,
sees,
yeah.
right? Like that's not what Frankenstein is, and like that's not what it's supposed to be about. So I love that you can get like different things out of this. Of course, Dr. Frankenstein is supposed to be the villain, right? Like he and like it's because it's to me in like looking at it from the perspective of however many years later. When did Mary Shelley write the book? In like the 1850s or something?
Late 18s,
Whatever.
Mid-late
Like
18s,
looking at it this many like over 100 years later, like I'm like, he, I don't think he was wrong. Like he was just trying to pursue his science and like got a little too carried away. Like
He was
at that
trying to
time,
understand the mysteries.
at that time it was like the hubris of science will lead you astray, and like if you believe in science and not God, then you will like be destroyed for it. Like I think that's really interesting that there are these different takes on it depending on when you're looking at it and how you're looking at it. And I completely view Hank Frank as the villain of the movie, and like I think that he was always supposed to be that, right? Like he is something
That's a
that
good point,
whether or
yeah.
not I agree with the politics of like shitting on science because you'll like create something that flies in the face of God or whatever. Like clearly in this story, he is supposed to be going so far over the edge into like uncharted territory that he creates something that is like against God, right? Like against nature.
So would have you believe, yes. Sure.
And I think that to reel it in a little bit, I think that in the movie he does a solid job portraying this. He's not the strongest character in the movie, I don't think, but like he does a good job, and
He's good enough.
I like when he's on screen, like him trying to shoo his fucking fiance back into a goddamn thunderstorm, like where she will surely die.
That was hilarious. That was absolutely hilarious.
Like she's like, please let me stay inside. He's like, you must get out of here.
I have work to do. Go away.
But I like him. I'll give him a 1.
All right. What do you got, Chris?
Yeah, Hank Frank is definitely the antagonist. And I think they did a really good job of making him the antagonist, because when you contrast it to what we said about the creature, he may not have been an intentional antagonist. His intentions may have been good, or his hubris of science, really. But it empirically, he was the antagonist to me. So he's getting a role. He's definitely getting a 1.
All right. I don't know where else to bring this up. Maybe I should have brought it up in themes, but there's a detail. Like I mentioned the Chekhov's brain thing. So what happens is when Hank Frank is gathering necessary components to enact his experiment, he sends his somewhat dim-witted assistant Fritz to break into the local medical college.
His Igor Fritz?
Igor/Fritz, E-Fritz, to steal like the brain that he needs to put into the body, right? So there's like some exposition beforehand where the doctor's like, here's a normal brain, here's the brain of a criminal, and notice the difference. So of course, like, he grabs a normal brain, it's like, here's a noise or something, ends up dropping it like within seconds. And so is it supposed to imply that, like, because he put the criminal brain into Frankenstein, to the body, then that's why he runs amok? Like, it's sort of a detail that's there, but it's never really addressed or otherwise commented upon throughout. So I thought that was sort of interesting, but I do, at the end of the day, I agree that both canonically and even within the terms of this story, that Hank Frank himself, the doctor that is indeed the antagonist, almost to himself, until, like, even as he alienates his friends and family, like, they're concerned about him, and like you said, Steve, he literally shoos them away into a horrible thunderstorm, at least at first.
Did you ever see Wuthering Heights? Does he not know what that does?
Sure. But anyway, so yeah, I think at the end of the day, like, more or less, it's more him than anything else, and I think he does deserve a 1. All right, so that's funny because it brings us to protagonists with you, Chris.
I have no idea. I kind of want to say Frankenstein, but he's not.
Nope.
To me, he's not really.
Nope.
And the doctor really isn't either. I mean, there's like a multitude of people.
Maybe the guy whose name is Victor but isn't Frankenstein.
Yeah, it just seems like people keep entering and exiting this film, and there is no true person or persons that you're following. So I'm going to say 0 on this one because I don't see, unless you guys can switch my mind, I don't see a protagonist or protagonists in this at all.
My view on this is that Elizabeth is the closest to a protagonist we have.
I like that.
I don't know if I'm going to give her a 1, but she is kind of the audience surrogate into this weird world.
And she's sort of the driving force. Like, she drives some of the action, not all of it, but a lot of it, at least enough of it. Which
is weird. It's weird that she's the audience surrogate to me because, and maybe I'm wrong about that, but I think that was how I felt like while I was watching it.
No, I tend to agree.
Because it's weird that she is, because she's not there all the time. Like, right? She's not the main story that we're following. Like the
focal point, I guess,
but she does keep the focus, I guess, of the movie, right? I guess you could say that the monster also has some protagonist qualities, but like not really. Like, he's kind of just a force of nature in this, especially because he can't talk. Like, right? If he could talk, there'd be a different story. Like, if they focus, perhaps even if he couldn't talk and they focused it a different way, it might be him. But I don't think it's the monster. I think it's Elizabeth. I'm leaning towards a 0. I might give it a 1 though. Scott, what do you think? And I'll make up my mind.
So, like, I had a stronger inclination to give it a 1, but that's when I was sort of calling Hank Frank the protagonist. But since we talked it out, I agree that Elizabeth is like the best candidate. But is she like enough of it, like part of it? She, like, I guess this might be funny. She sort of ties Frankenstein together in a sense, but like, she's not always there. But she is the impetus for them going to find him. And other points throughout of the action of the plot as well. Right. But for the most part, like, you guys both made equally good points, that convincing arguments that it might be just to be a default 0 because of what we just said. So I don't really have.
I kind of viewed Elizabeth more as a plot device. She's kind of there. I mean,
she has some decent characterization.
No. Yeah. I don't mean that in a negative. I don't need that in like a negative light. I mean that in she does provide some pull towards the real world for Hank Frank, but what gets him out and chasing the monster is that he after he locks her in the room in her wedding dress, the creature
climbs in the window
and takes her.
Then he feels guilty and responds, I created with my own hands and I must destroy it with my own hands, or whatever.
But what
I'm
saying is, it's not like she's in her own character, but I mean, in terms of the way they use her in the film, I think she's more of a plot device. And as I said, nothing against her character, it's just the way in which she's used.
Yeah, I think that both of those things convince me that I'm just going to default to a 0. Just not enough there, like I said, in light of what we just discussed, for the other character who might have been the protagonist otherwise.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to give it a 0.
Okay. All right, Steve-O. Well, that'll bring us to secondary, and that's all you.
Supporting characters. Well, there's Victor, non-Frankenstein.
Victor Nonenstein, if you will.
whatever his last name was, who was trying to bang Frankenstein's fiance.
Mm-hmm. Which is never quite explained, like how they knew each other.
I don't know what that was all about. I don't know if that guy was in the original book as under some other name, but
in high school, he was the jock that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Jesus Christ! Stop it. We don't need to. We don't need to hear your fucking whole psychological history. There was the Baron Frankenstein, who was a doddering old man.
He was terrific comedic relief, I'll say.
It was pretty good. I don't know. I kind of want to leave a couple to the rest of you guys, but like there's one that's very obvious that I'm sure you'll say, and if you don't, I will. But between the two of them, I thought they were pretty good. Like there's interesting world building going on like in this town. Like I felt like the town was pretty well realized by the end. Even like the guy, as I mentioned before, walking through the streets with his dead daughter, like. It felt like a real town he was walking through. It felt like a real celebration he was walking through, which is pretty good. And like that's all built by the supporting characters and things like that. So, what do you guys think? Yeah,
I don't have much more to add because like you sort of stole at the end there. I was going to say that the village itself, I think, collectively counts as a pretty good secondary character. And yeah, while like the Baron is like my favorite secondary character, like personally, because he did have like he's sort of like you said, doddering old man's like, let's have a drink now, like shit like that.
He doesn't need a drink.
This wine is too good for the help. Give him the champagne.
And when they bring him up, when they finally bring him to Frankenstein's like hideout, his tower where he's doing her experience, he's like, so many stairs, like he's walking up, like it's like shit like that. So like he was
always laughing,
yeah,
with his jowls,
and he had his whistle through
his jangling jowls,
with his royal chuckle and all that. So like he was an amusing character, like he was there enough, and like again sort of brought some levity. But I think like like I said, the little town itself, like even Victor, who was not Frankenstein, was fine. Like I thought he was okay, like a sort of like a kind of a sidekick / like maybe like alternate love interest perhaps. But all like it's all perfectly fine. Other than the Baron being like my personal favorite, I'm probably gonna give it a 1 just in general.
The Baron was definitely the one that was everything he said was just he was so I loved him. He was great. But I'm gonna give a lot of props to the creature and Karloff. What he did to portray the creature, he did a lot with very little. Yeah, considering he was grunting and groaning and everything was nonverbal. He really made me feel for the creature. I mean, he was, and so I feel like the creature was really, really important. I think that Karloff's performance really had a way to really did a lot to elevate it. And I would be remiss if I didn't. I kind of was deciding whether or not he was an antagonist, but not really. But I'm going to say him. The supporting antagonist was Fritz, because he's carrying this torch, and Hank is just like, get the torch away from the creature, and he keeps putting it in the creature's face to antagonize it.
Like it almost seems half of it is intentional and half of it is like he can't, like he's just bumbling around.
Well, no, I think it is intentional because he goes back later to antagonize the creature.
Why does he hate the creature
kills him
so much?
I don't know, but the creature kills him for all the
But you're right,
he fucking deserved it.
He somewhat was comedic relief, but also was kind of a dick about it. So sure.
I was going to mention that. Weird that the creature that's the main focus of this movie is a supporting character, but he definitely is, I think. And
just because of nature, like Chris said, because of the way like they took away a lot of his characteristics from the original, so he's not speaking, he can't have any dialogue. He's just force of nature, kind of
exactly.
Like you said.
And I'm glad you mentioned the torch thing, Chris, because like what I didn't understand why he was so much of an asshole to the monster. Like he just waving the fucking fire at it, like dude. I thought this was like your life's work. I thought you were trying to do this, and then as soon as he fucking wakes up, you're like, "Fuck this guy."
Well,
so
that's a
strange.
good point, but I did notice that for sure too.
Which was weird, but whatever. I still like both of them. I liked his little tiny short stick. Fritz's like little little walking stick. So and I think I think he had a good performance along with Boris Karloff and the other secondary characters,
the other players
as well. So I'm gonna give it a 1 for that.
All right, this is kind of a jokey thing, but not since you've mentioned it. Like Fritz is almost the accidental antagonist. He gets the wrong brain. He fucks that up. Yeah. He fucks up the torch thing, like you just said, like all that. So anyway, I just thought that was funny as you were talking. It made me think of it.
Yep.
But it looks like we're giving secondary a 1s all around. So that'll bring me to dialogue. Another somewhat tough one because it's your classic like 1930s to 40s like Universal monster movie dialogue where people like especially at the end is a good example where they're like they hear the monster like somewhere in the house. They're like he's upstairs, and they all run upstairs. Like, oh wait, no, he's in the visitor room. Like they have to say
what was the point of that?
Yeah, they have to say what they're doing before they do it.
Yeah,
and that's sort of like what I took points away from plot for as well. So like, it's not bad. Don't get me wrong. It's not like terrible. It's not like the worst shit ever written. It's just that it serves what it needs to serve for the most part, and it has a stilted like sort of almost play actor like stage sort of like aspect to it, which is fine. Yeah, but it's like because it's so exaggerated, it's almost like it's not the opposite. It's the opposite of conversational and like realistic dialogue.
So I'll say this, if you don't mind, Chris.
No, go ahead.
I think that I'm basing this dialogue against. You're not wrong, Scott. Let me say that first.
No.
But I'm basing this dialogue against the other Universal monster movies that we've seen, and I think it's better than those. And
okay, that might be true, but
I really appreciate the discussions of like science that they have in this, which is really where I'm going to give it a point for. I think I'm on a 1 right now, and it's because like, yeah, it's not perfect by any means, but like they talk about, what are the ethics of like bringing this creature to life, and like what like that type of thing. So I appreciate that, and like I like those discussions that they have in this movie, and I'm going to give it a 1 for that.
I'm giving it a 1 because, yes, there are some lines I really liked, and it did have all those classic tropes. But to be quite frank...
No, come on!
Yeah.
Be frank with us.
I'm being quite frank. In the middle where it dips, the two things that held my interest were definitely Karloff's performance and the unintentionally hilarious dialogue. I mean, like the discussions on science were good. Don't get me wrong, and I do agree with you there. But things that really, the dialogue really during those parts was the through line. And as a mechanic, yeah, Scott, you're right about that. But in service to the movie and what kind of, to me, kept the movie going, I felt the dialogue was actually really important. So it's kind of like a little column A, little column B 1, giving it a 1. So it might be a little softer 1, but It's not quite damning it with faint praise, but...
No, I get what you're saying. So I'm still gonna lie, like just over the fence on a 0. Yes, you guys are right about the sign. Like when they're interacting, like especially the Doctor and Frankenstein, and, and whoever else is around at the time. Yes, those are good scenes and good dialogue exchanges, but it doesn't outweigh like just the mediocre to like, if not bland, just again like someone has to say this, and then the plot moves on. To me, so we'll agree to just slightly disagree on that one, and that'll bring us to style, which is a good one with you, Chris.
This is interesting because I think we mentioned it in Wolfman that it seems like and I know Beth and I talked about the other night, like basically all these movies are shot in the same stage,
yes.
which is why in Wolfman.
Before you go on, I have a note that says, does this fog look familiar? Does this castle look familiar?
Does the town look familiar? Because
exactly.
I said during Wolfman, I'm like, for England, this town looks a little Bavarian, and here we are.
Well, they're all trying to be like German, aren't they, in this fucking movie?
I thought it was Bavaria or something like that as well.
Yeah, well, yeah, they are supposed to be. They're supposed to be. Yeah, they're supposed to be in Germany, and
but either way,
it's very weird.
It's one of these things where here's where I'm not sure about. And maybe I don't know. Maybe I'll take the point away from dialogue and put it in style. But James Whale, I don't want to jump ahead, but when you get to Bride of Frankenstein, you could see what he learned from this and how he kind of elevated it. So there's definitely things that work in this, but I didn't see, like in Wolfman, I saw that there was like that crane shot and a few other things that we saw. Yeah. But in this one, I didn't really get much more.
There was a great crane shot in this movie.
Which one?
Right towards the end.
Yeah.
There's when the I think it's when the thing is on fire at the end.
The windmill.
I think they do like
tower.
an overhead shot, and it's awesome.
Yeah, the funny thing, the other thing was, I noticed when they were having the chase out on the rocks, they kept running by the same rocks.
Well, I'm going back to that in a second.
But I was going to say, now, here's my question on the style. he did shoot it from different directions,
From angles, yeah.
for different angles. And the miniature work on this was pretty good. 'Cause,
True.
I don't know. I think I just talked myself style into a 1 because
Okay.
I think they did a lot with very little.
All right. Should I mark you down for a 1 then?
Yeah.
All right. So here's my sort of take on it. I'll work backwards. Yeah, it was. The thing is, the rocks thing was fine, except because it went on a little bit too long. For going back to what we started off with, it veered out become like a fucking Benny Hill chase scene to me.
Yes, it did.
Because they kept going back through one rock and like a fucking Scooby Doo thing. So like that's fine, but as we said, the sets are familiar because the Universal reuse a lot of their same sets, and you know them because of these movies. But I still think they work. Like, given that if you hadn't had seen the other ones or didn't know that they were the same thing, right? That you'd seen the castle, excuse me, in Dracula, and like the same forest and the moors and Wolfman, it still works. Like, yeah, they're like clearly sets, but that's what they had to work with at the time. And I still think it sets a tone. Like, it was believable enough, especially the town, and everybody like bought into it, sort of like leaned into selling it to like for whatever scenery it was. And as you said, Steve-O, especially I think when the mob starts forming at the end, and there's like a great shot when they're running through the forest and everyone's carrying a torch, like even before they get to the rock scene and before they trap the monster up on the hill. Like, I thought that was really cool. So like, yeah, overall, I think it was shot very nicely. All the points that I'm taking away from pacing I already took off. But otherwise than that, I think I'm going to give style, and especially the makeup for Boris as well.
Yeah.
It's pretty solid.
That's true. That was seamless. I mean,
that's all I've got.
the backdrop curtains, you could see the wrinkles in it,
Yeah,
but his makeup was seamless.
I completely agree with the things you guys just said. I will say that there were absolutely points where I was like, I don't know about this. Also, there was, I don't think, any music really.
There was less of it than the other ones.
The sound design was not on par with, like, Wolfman was actually really good sound design.
Yeah.
But what I will say, and I would give this movie a 1 if for no other reason than that awesome burning windmill entire scene at the end. Like, that was cool, as hell. Yep. Even to me, like, now, like, watching it. So I'm going to give it a 1 for that. Amongst other reasons that you guys have already mentioned.
But that was like a highlight for you.
That was definitely a highlight for me. And I will, I'm going to go with that.
All right. So very nice. One's all around, and I'll bring it back. Actually, keep talking, Steve.
Hold on. Did you go with the 1, Chris, or did you stick with 0?
I went with the 1.
I think he talked himself into 1, and
all right.
So it'll bring us back. You can just keep talking, Steve. Recommendation. Do you recommend Frankenstein the original?
I would say that this is a movie that is an enjoyable watch. Again, so like a lot of these movies that we do in Halloween, I think, at least the ones that I recommend, I always say this stuff is great to watch around Halloween, or even like on Halloween day if you're with friends, or even if you're just sitting around by yourself. Like, this stuff is awesome. It's got atmosphere, it's got feeling.
Yep.
It's gonna feel like an old movie. If you can get over that, then you'll enjoy it. I definitely recommend it as like an old school horror movie. There's a reason it's a classic, and give it a watch if you haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, I agree with you. I always watch these films around Halloween. And I think they all, for different reasons, are good watches to at least watch once. This one, thematically, from what we talked about, and the impact it's had, if for no other reason, you should watch that. It is a classic monster movie. I highly recommend it, just, again, for your edification. But thematically, I think as Ian pointed out with the Wolfman, that there's some really cool themes buried in these movies that you don't really think about. So,
or wouldn't expect, perhaps.
Or you wouldn't expect, especially for the time. So, yeah, I strongly recommend seeing this. I
mean, yeah, I don't have much more to add. I do recommend it. I prefer it at this point over Dracula, and maybe even-ish, if not even over Wolfman as well. So I guess when we're done the entire selection, we'll see which one we prefer the most.
Yep.
But this one might have been my favorite so far. So yeah, I definitely recommend it. So with that, I think I'll go to the scores. Hopefully I've done it right. Looks like Chris and Steve-O, you guys have given it an 8, and I've given it a 7. Oddly, even though I just said it was my favorite one. So but I believe that leaves us with a 7.6 overall. Correct me if I'm wrong.
6 is repeating, yep.
Yep.
Yeah, so, I mean, yeah, again, like you said, it's pretty solid. These are all the classic monster movies, as we mentioned, but I think this one, like I said, is probably a bit, edges out the others a bit more at this point, so it still fucking stands, and it's still enjoyable to watch, like you guys said. So I think that will do it for this episode of MOTS-O-Ween 2018. I, of course, have been Scott Thurlow, here with Christopher Morgan.
Now I know what it feels like to be God.
Indeed, you do. And Saver Demosi.
Fire bad.
Yep. Oh, never forget that fire is bad. Good night. See you next time.
Editing and engineering by Christopher Morgan. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.